Let's get into the video. Am I wrong for refusing to marry a woman? I am bisexual. I am very confident in my asexuality and have a history of dating both. However, I've always known that when it comes to marriage, I want to be able to have biological children with my partner. For that reason, I see myself only marrying a man. In my past relationships with women, I have been very open about this. It's never posed an issue. However, about 3 years ago, I met my current girlfriend, Grace. It started as a hookup, then escalated to a situation. Usually, whenever things get to that point, I like to make the disclaimer in terms of wanting to have biological children and not dating to marry. Grace seemed understanding, thanked me for being straightforward, and assured me that she is not looking for marriage either. We agreed to keep seeing each other casually, with no strings attached. A couple months later, Grace suggests we start being exclusive. I reminded her that I was not dating for marriage. She asked me if I was seeing anyone else. I told her no. She said that it would make sense for us to be exclusive until our relationship had run its course naturally. I really liked her and wasn't interested in anyone else, so after making sure that there was no misunderstanding about marriage, I agreed, and we started dating. I understood that this kind of relationship could get complicated. Hence, I was reluctant to bring her to meet my family, etc. But every time she would insist, ensuring everything was fine and that she knew exactly what was at stake. My family loved her, and soon people started asking when the wedding was, to which Grace would smugly respond, "I don't want to marry her." I laughed along, assuming it was a joke, but something started feeling off. I confronted her to make sure we were still on the same page, and she told me to stop treating me like a effing child and constantly checking up on my feelings. She said to back off. We got into an argument about it, but the next day she apologized and asked me to just stop bringing it up so often. I explained that I was just looking out for our feelings, but if it was overbearing, I would back off. We agreed, and I stopped bringing it up. We've been dating for almost 2 years. However, my mind hasn't changed in terms of marriage, though I stopped bringing it up as per her request. I came home from work to my apartment covered in flowers and candles, and she was on one knee. Before she even got around to asking, I immediately said no and walked out, fuming. She followed me, and a fight ensued as she told me I was a huge BCH and an arsehole for leading her on for 2 years. I explained that my feelings in terms of marriage hadn't changed, i.e., biological kids, and she called me homophobic and a bigot and stormed out. We haven't spoken since. Am I wrong? Relevant comments. Commenter, out of curiosity, what would you have done if she didn't do this and blow up the relationship? Specifically, did your relationship have an endpoint where you would seek out a man to marry and have kids with? OOP, I'm not sure. In general, I suppose if I felt she was the love of my life, I probably would give up my dream of having biological children. But seeing as how this remained more important to me, she clearly wasn't. What she said, and what I agreed with, was that we would remain exclusive until our relationship had run its natural course. I guess that would mean until either the marriage thing or other issues became too much to stay together. Did you ever talk about marriage with her, as in having kids together? I never talked to her about marriage in terms of it being between her and me. The only context I mentioned it in was warning her that I was not looking to marry a woman. We never really talked about kids in terms of having them together in any way. She never told me she was interested in marriage. It was never brought up, and we never had that conversation. All she told me regarding marriage was that she was on the same page as me and didn't like being constantly reminded of my position because it made her feel like I was treating her like a child watching out for her feelings. So I stopped bringing it up myself. If you're fixed on marrying a man, why not just date men? What was your end goal? Because I am not looking to settle down and get married just yet and am attracted to both genders. I don't see casual dating as obligatory, whether it would have been with a man or a woman. To be honest, I believe in casual dating. Plenty of people date without the intention of marriage, and I always thought that it was perfectly reasonable as long as boundaries and expectations were set and communicated from the start. But your post clearly outlines how you made decisions that went beyond casual dating. TBH, I never saw this lasting as long as it did. You're right, 2 years is a long time, and when she initially suggested being exclusive, I couldn't foresee how long it would last. I agreed because it made sense. I wasn't seeing anyone else, and I did really like her and enjoy her company. I figured if the terms were clear with both of us, it couldn't hurt to be exclusive for a while. Then things just never broke off. I was probably too comfortable and reluctant to get out of that comfortable place with her, and that is my fault. But I was also under the impression that we were both aware that marriage was still not the end goal here. Does it stop being casual dating after 3 years? You're right, but when she initially suggested it, I never assumed it would last that long. It just sort of happened. But I assumed that the terms for the entire duration of our relationship remained the same. whether it be 3 weeks or 3 years, unless we had an explicit conversation that stated otherwise. We never did. She never even brought it up to me that marriage had been on my mind. Instead, I was blindsided by a proposal. OOP further defines her view on relationships. To me, my mentality feels very similar to the way people approach high school or college relationships. Are you dating your high school or college sweetheart for marriage? Probably not. Are you planning out this relationship long term? Probably not. Do most people end up marrying those partners they've had in their youth? Usually no. These people aren't ready for marriage. But that doesn't mean anyone is leading anyone on. But you're young, you're in love, and you're having fun, exploring romantic relationships and discovering yourself. I think that as long as terms are made clear, it's unfair to assume a relationship will end in marriage just because you're getting older, and I'm saying this whether I'm dating a man or a woman. Right now, I am not ready for marriage. I would make that disclaimer with every relationship I enter. When I'm ready to start dating for marriage, I will obviously start looking at dating exclusively men. Why is it important to have a biological child with your partner? And also, if you had met a man while you were with your GF, would you have dumped her for him? To answer your first question, I'm not sure why. Since I was little, I've been extremely drawn to the idea of having a family where the child is both biologically related to me and my partner. Long term, I see myself marrying a man. It's always been that way. And I can't necessarily explain it. And I don't think that I should be required to, as everybody has their own preferences when it comes to building a family. I have absolutely nothing against IVF, adoption, etc. But my first choice is the traditional route and having a baby naturally that is both related to me and my partner. I think many people who want children can agree that this is the preferred method. No one wants to do IVF to have a child if they can do so naturally. Not to mention that alternative methods of building a family cost thousands of dollars and are usually not covered by insurance. It is not something to be taken lightly, like oh, just do IVF or adopt, but people fail to consider that it is an enormous financial expense that not many can afford, including myself. As for the second question, if I met a man who wanted kids while I was with her, I would not have dumped her. I wasn't, and still am not looking for a relationship that would end in marriage. I was planning to wait a couple years or so before I was ready to start something like that. I also think that cheating is an arsehole move, no matter the nature of your relationship. She wasn't just a bed warmer for me. As other people in the comments have said or implied, I really cared for her and was truly committed to seeing this relationship through. Update. First of all, I want to thank everyone for their comments. It was helpful to see things from a different perspective. I wrote the post still mad from being blindsided, so I apologize if my writing lacked empathy, as some have pointed out. I do care deeply for Grace and acknowledge my role in what led us to end up in this mess. For that, I am sorry. We talked today after taking the weekend to cool down. I explained my perspective to her, saying that I felt blindsided and a bit betrayed by the out-of-the-blue proposal, especially since she was the one who asked to stop bringing up the marriage issue while we were together. She said she proposed as a sort of last resort, since she knew that if marriage was brought up casually in conversation, I would freak out and leave. Her hope was that a grand romantic gesture might work, i.e., proposing. I explained that I am not ready for marriage with anyone yet, but of all the people I have been with, I cared for her the most. And the last thing I ever wanted to happen was for her to be hurt. I also explained that I wished our communication throughout our relationship had been clearer to avoid the hurt and mess that we ended up in. Obviously, we have decided to go our separate ways. After our conversation, the parting was amicable. I wish her nothing but the best. Edit to say, for people asking me, what did I expect to happen going into a relationship with an expiration date? I've been in relationships with both men and women like this before. I may be naive, but I am not stupid enough to set my expectations for something like this without having had prior experience. Granted, they didn't last 3 years. The longest one was just short of 2, but they went very differently. Once both sides made clear that marriage was not the end goal, we were together until one of us was ready to have a conversation and decided that it was time to move on. Granted, each time it hurts, but when you set expectations from the start, it was only natural that the relationship would run its course. Each of those relationships ended amicably. There were no fights, no proposal, and no hurt feelings. Going into this, I expected the same. Thank you for watching the video.